think just for a minute as we try to summarize or capture the overview of what's being said in these chapters, or in these 4 chapters tonight, here beginning with Eliphaz, as he comes to give Job counsel. So, look at the end of verse 3, or chapter 3. This is where Job is. This is his frame of mind. In 25 and 26, what I feared has come upon me, he said. Now remember back, he's sitting in ashes, taking a piece of broken pottery and scraping his skin. I don't know what type of skin disease this is, and there's speculation as to that, but there is nothing about it that sounds pleasant or something that we would want to endure in our own life. And he's thinking, what I feared has come upon me, what I dreaded has happened to me. I have no peace, I have no quietness, I have no rest. And what else do we know that he does not have? He does not have the support of his wife. He does not have any children, nor does he have any of his possessions anymore. All has been taken away. But he does have one thing. He has trouble. He has turmoil. He has misery. He talks about it in several different ways. He has anguish in his life. So Eliphaz becomes the first one to speak to him, and he begins to speak in chapter 4 there. And he begins his conversation with him. As he begins, he appears to be concerned, and he also appears to be somewhat gracious to Job. He reminds Job here, well, first of all, look, I think it conveys a sense of compassion and concern here in verse 2. Verse 1, then Eliphaz the Temanite replied, if someone ventures a word with you, will you be patient? Or will you be impatient? Or in other words, would you entertain a word of counsel? I think is what he's saying here. And then he goes on and he kind of encourages Job a little bit by saying, think about how many times you've been the one who has instructed other people. You've been aware, you've been watching, you've been involved in the lives of the friends and family and people around you. When they've struggled, you've been the one who has come to them and offered them counsel or helped them in their time of need. And then when we move into verse 7, though, we notice in verses 7 and 8, or since Job was able to give counsel to others, let me back up just a little bit. Eliphaz has acknowledged that Job's ability to counsel others when they're in need. So basically, I think what he is going to lead up to here and say is, if you've done that, surely you should be able to discern the reason for your own situation. You're a man of wisdom. Apply the wisdom that you have and that you know as experienced in life and discern your own situation. So when we get to verses 7 and 8, what we see here in 7 and 8, it's pretty obvious what Job's current situation means according to Eliphaz. Look at verses 7 and 8. Consider now, who being innocent has ever perished? Where were the upright ever destroyed? Now Eliphaz is speaking here. As I have observed, those who plow evil and those who sow trouble reap it. So what is Eliphaz saying to him?
You got yourself into this.
He said, you sinned. Here's the problem. Those who sow trouble reap trouble. And that's, that's true to a certain extent. But also we're going to learn it's not necessarily true in Job's life. But he's already beginning to frame the context or present his position that he is going to, or the approach that he is going to come to Job with in his counsel. He's saying to him, you've sinned. So Eliphaz is going to go on and somehow here, and throughout the dialogue, he's going to try to substantiate his position a little bit further in verses 12 through 16 by saying that he has a secret revelation. He received this secret revelation while dreaming. And how convenient that is, that he has a word of knowledge about Job's situation. And, because basically he has just called him out and said, your issue The primary concern, Job, whether you are willing to admit it or not, is the fact that you have sinned. There must be sin in your life for you to be experiencing the circumstance or situation that you find yourself in. And I've mentioned several times about a principle known as the Retribution Principle. And this was the prevailing wisdom of that day, and it's still prominent in our day. But the prevailing wisdom, which is referred to oftentimes as the Retribution Principle, is simply this: that the righteous prosper and the wicked are punished. So sitting in front of Eliphaz is a man who appears to be in what condition? One who is being punished. So in line with the prevailing wisdom, if he is experiencing these things in his life, he is also experiencing the retribution of God. Now, prior to this, prior to what Eliphaz is saying, you must have sown some sin in your life, and now you are reaping it. Prior to that, Eliphaz would have said, in line with the retribution principle, all of this prosperity has come to you because of your walk with God, your righteousness. So the role has been reversed. So obviously he is thinking, from his perspective, Eliphaz's perspective, this is the problem, Job. You're a man of wisdom. You're able to help others. You should be able to discern why this trouble has come into your life. In verse 17, we see, basically it's a rhetorical question, but it has an obvious answer. Look at verse 17. Can a man be more righteous than God? What's the answer to that? No. The second rhetorical question, 17b, can a man be more pure than his maker? And the obvious answer to that, again, is no. So basically, Eliphaz is saying to Job in verse 17, all have sinned. Now, we understand that from New Testament context very well, from Paul's doctrinal teaching to us in the book of Romans. It's true that we have all sinned. And this is what he is trying to convey to Job, that it's obvious, Job, that sin is in your life. So when we move into chapter 5, Eliphaz, it seems to be so convinced that Job has sinned against God in some way that he challenges Job to call out, to seek answer. He says, call out if you will. But then the question is, or the rhetorical question is, who's going to answer you? To which of the holy ones will you turn? Where will you turn to find help? And one of the things that we'll mention here in just a few moments, where Job finally turns, about a third of the way through chapter 7, Job finally turns to God and takes his conversation in that direction. But Eliphaz never does. Eliphaz never does. Eliphaz has got a word from the divine, he said, that came to him in a vision, a word about what Job's situation is. And what we haven't seen up to this point, we've seen some logic and some reasoning, but that logic and reasoning has been in line with the prevailing wisdom, we said, in this principle of the righteous are prospered and the wicked are punished. But there's not been any reasoning with Job and allowing Job to, let's work through this together. It's all one-sided. The conversation seems to be one-sided from Eliphaz. Where can you call out and get help? And I think the implication is, for Job to deny his sin, Eliphaz would be foolish to deny your sin. Look at verse 7. As surely as sparks fly upwards. All of us have been around a campfire, right? Which way do the sparks fly? They always go. It's a practical thing. It's a practical example or illustration. As surely as the sparks fly upward, he says, people will face trouble with each other. People will face trouble with God because of what sin does. What sin does in our life. If we have conflict with one another, usually it's related to some sense of relating to some sin. Something that they've done, we've done, or we've allowed to happen, taken place. So in verse 8, Eliphaz does this. He tells Job, if I were you, I would call out to God for justice. Interesting. If I were you, that's what I would do, Eliphaz says. And do what? In verses 18 and 19. Admit your sin. Accept God's correction and discipline. In verses 18 or verses 17 and 18. Blessed is the man whom God corrects. So if God is correcting him, what is he saying? That he sinned. So Eliphaz is telling him again. He's hammering this home. You know, you're a wise man. You've helped others through your life. Can't you discern what is at the cause? What is the root cause of what's going on in your life? Blessed is the man who God corrects. So do not despise the discipline. Job, take the punishment that is rightly due you for your sin, and go on and live out the rest of your life in full vigor. That's verse 26 of chapter 5. Just accept the discipline, take it because you know you have sinned. Allow God to continue to restore you, to bless you, and to lead you through, protect you, provide for you. Verse 23, enjoy this amazing covenant that God is going to provide for you in your life, and then enter into the grave in verse 26. Enter into the grave having lived a good, full, vigorous life. Now look at verse 27. Is Eliphaz convinced? We have examined this, and it is true. What's true? That you're a wise man, but there must be sin in your life. So hear what I've told you. Hear my counsel, Eliphaz would be saying to Job. Listen to what I'm saying. I've even got it on good word from a divine source that you have sinned and you need to take this counsel and apply it to your life. And then Job gets an opportunity to respond. So the counsel of Eliphaz, when we think about all that he said, as you read through these chapters again and begin to try to allow this poetry that is presented to us here in these two chapters, what you begin to see is that Eliphaz hasn't provided Job with any answers to why he is enduring so much anguish. What's he been doing? He's been accusing. He's been accusatory. Just listen to me. Turn or burn. This is where it's at. No explanation or trying to help him understand, where he is, what's going on in his life. So, what does Job say in chapter 6, verse 1? He says, if only my anguish, because he's in misery, if only his anguish could be measured, the amount of his suffering has to be devastating. Not only the emotional, but the physical, and the two tied together, all coming about in a short period of time, perhaps within a matter of a day or so. So Job's misery, in verses 8 and 9, Job's misery still has him longing for death. We've seen that in chapter 3. In his lament, that he'd gotten to the place he was in such misery and so distraught, that he was longing for death. But in 8 and 9, we see that's still where he is. Oh, that I might have my request, that God would grant what I hope for. And what he hopes for is spelled out in verse 9. He wants God, that God would be willing to crush him, to let loose his hand, and to cut me off. The phrase "to be cut off" is a reference or a metaphor for what? For dying, for death. That God would allow him to go ahead and die. And that being the case, if the Lord would grant that to him, notice that Job says that he can, in verse 10, that he can go on and die as a man who has maintained his integrity. He has full confidence that he's not done anything that would be deserving again, of the conventional wisdom of that day that would deserve what has come into his life. He has no concept of doing anything like that. So he believes he's a man of integrity. He believes he's a man of that is faithfully seeking to follow after God. And yet this calamity this tragic calamity has come into his life, and it's unexplained to him. So Job's friends, he goes on to talk about in verses 14 and 15, he talks about them being a huge disappointment. They've come to him, one has spoken to him. He says in verse 21 that you're no help. They've not offered any help to him. They haven't taught him anything new about why he's suffering. They haven't brought anything new to the conversation. Any new concept, any new idea. Therefore, what Job wants is he wants them to take back their slanderous statements. In verse 24, he says, teach me, and I'll be quiet. Show me where I've been wrong. So in that verse, Job is challenging Eliphaz. Bring a new revelation to me that is dependable. Bring me a truth, is what he's saying. Look at 25. How painful are honest words. Sometimes the truth hurts, does it not?
Yes.
It does. But what Job is contending to Eliphaz is you're not bringing truth. You're bringing your conjecture. You're bringing your idea as to what's going on in my life. But what do your arguments prove? He has no argument. And then when you get down to 28 and 29, but now be so kind to me as to look at me. Would I lie to your face? If they are friends, they must have some sense of history with each other. And so he's saying, have I ever lied to you before? Look at me. I'm speaking to you. Have I ever lied to you? What about my testimony? All the testimony of his righteousness. And then he says to Eliphaz, repent and do not be unjust. Reconsider can also mean take back. Take back your slanderous accusations. Because Eliphaz was saying to him, regardless of what you're trying to say or trying to believe, obviously, if you find yourself in this situation, there must be some hidden sin. And he's saying that you need to take back those type of words.
Well, Eliphaz has already put his foot in it because he said what he's telling him it came from God. So is Eliphaz lying, or is he just thinks, logically speaking, like you said, you're in this mess, you must have blew it somewhere.
Yeah.
But yet he's saying his revelation comes from God.
Well, I think
But Job knows better because Job knows he has done no wrong.
Job knows he hadn't done anything.
Right.
God knows he hadn't done anything. Satan knows he hadn't done anything. But Job doesn't know that he's in the midst. Why he's in the midst of this. But Eliphaz, again, Eliphaz is going by the conventional wisdom of the day. And what was it? If you're blessed, it's because you're living a godly life. If you're being, if hardship and pain is coming upon you, it must be because you're a sinner. A big-time sinner.
Yeah, because he still had all his wealth and everything.
Obviously. Eliphaz, he's still got his wealth. So he sees himself as a man of wisdom, a righteous man. He sees himself that way. So notice as we move into chapter 7, Job concludes his response to Eliphaz by directing his comments towards God. We mentioned that earlier. So Job begins to look towards God, and he's going to begin to bring his case, so to speak, to God, because God is the one who ultimately is the only one that's going to affect any change in his life, not Eliphaz. So look at that in verse 7, verse 7 of chapter 7. He says here, remember, O God, that my life is but a breath. So now he's directed his conversation to the Lord. Lord, remember, what we see in the verses that follow right after this as we work our way down. Job sees his life quickly passing, and it's passing without any real hope or happiness in the immediate future. Look back at verse 6. He says, my days are swifter than a weaver's shuttle. If that's the weaver's shuttle that people not quilt, but they make rugs with. They have the Heritage Festival over in Lanesville sometimes. There's some Amish ladies that come over there, and they set up a small one, and they can work that thing, pretty quick. And so what is he? He's drawing a practical, illustration here. He says, my days are like that. And some of us can say our days are just probably almost like that as well, too. It seems like you wake up on Monday and you go to bed on Friday. I used to have a man tell me that all the time. But notice what he says, it's faster than a weaver's shuttle, and they come and end without any hope. He's in the midst of anguish and misery, and his days are coming and going quickly. And then in verse 7 he says, my eyes will not see happiness again. So he sees that his life is passing. He sees no real immediate hope, and he sees, or I guess he's, from his perspective, if things don't change, how can he expect to enjoy any happiness? And he goes on to expand on that a little bit, but therefore I think what he's saying is, he calls out to God in verse 11, therefore I will not keep silent. I will speak out in the anguish of my spirit. And he is in anguish. And he says, I'm going to complain in the bitterness of my soul. He begins to question the Lord. And there's nothing wrong with bringing our cares and concerns, bringing the anxieties of our life to the Lord. That's where we need to bring them, because that's where truth is, and that's where help can be found, from the Lord. So this is where he turns his direction. And I think Job wants us to know why every aspect of his life, or Job wants to know from the Lord why every aspect of his life is under such great scrutiny. Look at verses 17 through 19. Lord, what's going on? What's going on with me? Verse 12. Start at verse 12. And, am I the seed? What is the seed? In Scripture, seed, especially in this in the time frame in which Job would have lived, early in the years of Scripture, the seed was seen the seed was almost personified as a monster in charge of chaos and judgment. You could go to the sea, and if you weren't living right, judgment would come upon you. You remember a story about a man by the name of Jonah? What did the sailors say? All right, who sinned? Wasn't that their statement? If the seas are up, if we're in the midst of a storm, it's because somebody sinned, and the sea god is going to bring judgment. And so Job is saying to the Lord, is that who I am? Or the monster of the deep, Leviathan, Lophan, that you would put a guard on me? Listen to what he's saying. When I think my bed will comfort me and my couch will ease my complaint, even then you frighten me with dreams and you terrify me with visions, so that I prefer strangling and death rather than this body of mine. I despise my life. I would not live forever. I think he must be in a quandary in the midst of horrific anguish and misery. For Job, a man of righteousness, upright in the eyes of God, to say, leave me alone. Asking God to leave him alone. My days have no meaning. Would they have any meaning? If everything he had, everything he cherished was gone, and the only thing he had left was his life, but his life was all gone, he just couldn't die. He says, my life has no meaning. What is man that you make so much of him, that you give him so much attention? Proverbs 15:3, the eyes of the Lord are everywhere, keeping watch. So the eyes of the Lord are on him. Psalm 139, there's nowhere we can go. If we go to heaven, the Lord is there. If we go down into the deep, the Lord is there. There's nowhere we can go that the Lord is not. I guess Job is saying it seems to him that he must be under God's microscope. Everything that he does. What is man that you make so much of him, that you give him so much attention, that you examine him every morning and you test him every moment? Will you never look away from me or let me alone even for an instant? If I have sinned, what have I done to you, O watcher of men? The watcher of men would be the Lord. Why have you made me your target? Have I become a burden to you? And I think it just seems as though Job is saying, is there ever going to be the opportunity for forgiveness? What have I done? Whatever it is there not going to be any forgiveness? Why do you not pardon me, in verse 21, for my offenses? Why would you not forgive me my sin? For I will soon lie down in the dust. You will search me, but I will be no more. I mean, the devastation in his life, in his heart, in his mind is very difficult.